Hi guys, Abraham here. Welcome to another video in this series. Today, I am going to be the first to admit I was wrong. I made a mistake. Well, not a mistake, but I made a decision that was not the best decision for you guys. And let me tell you what I mean by this. As you remember, we've been working on this chest for the last couple of weeks, and we went on to the control rig phase. I show you how to do a very simple rig here inside of Maya. We did this rig right here, where we can animate the movement, we can animate the lid, and we can even animate the little joint handlers right here. However, I show you how to do a control rig inside of Unreal, and the idea was to bring this into Unreal and animate inside of Unreal. But I realized that I was making things a little bit harder than it should, especially for people who are just beginning their 3D journey. And this series, in its inception, was supposed to be something helpful for you, my friends. So I apologize. I'm not going to delete the past video because the information that I share there is valuable and it works for what we're doing, but I'm going to continue the animation here inside of Maya to make sure that I can teach you the principles that I want to share with you. Now, that does not mean that I'm not going to be showing you how to animate inside of Unreal, but we're going to be doing that later as a separate series. I'm actually thinking about doing a little character. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. And yeah, let's get now on to the creation of our animations here inside of Maya. Let's go. Now, before we continue with this, just one quick announcement. Today, or at the time of this recording, this is the last week to submit for the Weapon of Legend contest, which is our first contest here in the channel. There's going to be a $100 US prize for whoever wins this. And yeah, just make sure to go into the video, check the rules. You still have time. I mean, it's just 4 days, but you might be able to get something in and maybe win. Who knows? And yeah, just check our Discord to make sure that you submit before the time ends. Let's go. Well, so this is our element right here, and today I'm going to be doing something that's not... It's not that it's not ideal, but it's just a fast way to animate our element right here because I want to jump straight into animation. And that is, we're going to be animating directly on the joints. The only reason why we normally don't animate in the joints is because rigs tend to be really complicated and you usually want to use controllers to animate them. However, there's absolutely nothing wrong with animating inside of the joints except for, again, the cleanliness of things. So down here on my time scale, I'm going to bring this back to 0. So we're going to start in time 0. And the first thing I need to do is I need to do an opening animation. I'm gonna grab my bone right here. I'm gonna set the first keyframe, the 0 keyframe, to S. I'm gonna hit S to animate this. And now I need to think, how long do I want this opening animation to last? And usually I would say it's about 1 second or something. So by frame 24, which is usually 1 second and 24 frames per second, I'm gonna be doing this right here. I'm gonna be opening the chest and leaving it roughly around there. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, if we're going to be running a game and the game is going to be optimized to be running at 60 frames per second, do we really need to run this at 20, or do we need to animate at 20 frames per second? And the answer is yes. It doesn't really matter. What's going to happen in the game is that you're going to have more frames and therefore the animation is going to look smoother, but it's still going to take 1 second. In this case, we're animating at 24 frames per second. It's still going to take 1 second for the chest to open, regardless of how many frames we see of that specific second. So once we have this, we can just take a look and see how this looks. And if we do this, you're going to see that, I mean, the opening doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look great either. And this is because of something called the curves. Whenever we're animating, we need to understand that in principle, what's happening is we're translating the movement from one position to another, or rotation or whatever. But we're going from one position to another. This is called pose-to-pose animation. However, the way in which we get to this position, so in this case, the way we get from frame 0 to frame 24 is quite important, and we can change this interpolation, it's called, to generate a slightly different effect. So let's say, for instance, we want the chest to open slightly, kind of like unlocking, let's say on frame 3, I like this position right here. So I want a click, small frame, and then it opens back all the way up. And so instead of doing a one smooth transition from beginning to end, we're gonna have a slow, ease in, and then we're gonna do the whole thing. So I'm gonna use this pose right here, or I'm gonna go, let's say, to frame 8. I'm just gonna close the chest a little bit. Let me get rid of the screen rotate. There we go. So I'm going to have it right around there. And by doing this, what's going to happen is from frame 0 to frame 8, it's going to slightly open the lid of the chest, and then it's going to go all the way to the back. And then at the very end, I could also do a little animation where it kind of bounces back. I think that will be interesting. So I'm going to go 2 frames forward. I'm going to bounce here, and then this thing is going to bounce back. And then it's going to, a couple of frames after that, it's going to bounce back and just settle. So now, if we play this animation, which by the way, I'm gonna like make this a lot smaller, let's say 35 frames or something, so we don't have to play everything. And if we see this animation, it should look interesting. So that looks interesting. I like the little like tap at the very end. I think it's a little bit too slow, so we might be able to make it a little bit faster and maybe not as intense. So I'm gonna go to this guy right here, and here's where the magic's gonna happen. Let's go to the Windows and the animation editors and graph editor. Now, the cool thing about this animation is that everything is happening on the x-axis or on the x rotation. If you remember, this is something that we planned ahead when we were doing our rigs to make sure that it was the first thing that we like analyzed. So what is happening here is this thing in frame 0 is completely closed. By frame 8, it opens up a little bit smoothly. As you can see, we have a smooth curve right here, and then it very smoothly and sharply goes here, bounces back, and then just like remains at the final position. So what we can do here is we can change the interpolation of how this looks. For instance, I would like this first part of the animation to be linear, meaning that if I click, let's open this. If I do this right here, the animation, the first opening animation is going to be very linear. So there's not going to be any slow in or slow out. It's just going to open linearly, kind of like if it just like has a spring or something, and then it's going to smoothly move all the way to the back. So if we see the animation now, if we hit play right here, you can see how it opens nicely and then boom, swings back. However, we have a little bit of an issue here in frame 8. And the problem is that we're not giving frame 8 enough time for us to read what kind of animation is happening. And if we don't give the animation enough time, we're not going to be able to read this sort of like stop that we're trying to convey. So I'm going to give myself, let's say 4 frames right here. I'm going to go to frame 8, and then with middle mouse, I'm going to click on frame 12 and I'm going to hit S. And as you can see, this gives me a flat linear progression. So what's going to happen now is in 8 frames, this thing is going to slowly open, and then it's going to stay at that same distance for 4 frames, which is a fraction of a second. And then it's going to swing open and do the little bounce back at the end. So now if we take a look at the animation, this is what we should see. It opens and then opens all the way back. Not bad, right? Like we're getting something. However, I definitely think that this stop is a little bit too much. I do want to have a little bit of stop so that people can see it, but I want to be a little bit less intense. So inside of Maya, the way in which you can move things, which by the way, let me move my camera just a little bit. There we go, so we can see the timeline. So I'm going to press shift and right click or left click, sorry, and we're going to drag this back. So I want this to happen very fast. I want the first 3 frames to open, and then I do want to hold, but I don't want to hold for 5 frames. Let's hold for only 2 frames. So we hold for 2 frames and then we do our open. That again is going to change. In this case, we're not dealing with the animation. We're dealing with something called timing, which is the time it takes for each action to happen. The faster or the less frames there are, the faster the action is going to appear. So now we have the open and then open back. There we go. We have this little like a little spring. It stops and then it goes back. I think we can exaggerate the stop a little bit more. So I'm going to give myself 1 more frame only. And we got this. There we go. That's looking a little bit better. Now, what else can we do here? What else could we change to make this thing a little bit more interesting? Well, what could happen is that after this little snap right here, it completely falls back in a faster way. Right now, our curve right here is telling us that this thing is going to be doing a smooth transition. It's very common to get the automatic transition in this sort of like S curve as we go back. And that's not exactly what we want. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this little key right here, and I'm going to break the tangent. I need to break the tangent to do this. So I'm going to break this tangent with this little V option, break tangent, so that I can move each little leg independently with middle mouse. And what I want to do here is I want to actually accelerate this. I want the open to be quite fast. And then as we get to this position, it's going to slow down a little bit. So let's do something like this. It's going to be a very like fast swing that we're going to see. We can actually like snap this thing here so that we can see the animation and the curves at the same time. And now let's take a look at how the animation plays. So if we play, there we go. So you can see how it swings back. And now, of course, the like coming back or the bounce at the back is wrong, but the opening, it looks very, very nice. So I can imagine if I'm looking this at the game, it's going to do the little click, and then it's going to be doing the whole fall back into the back of the element. So I like this. This looks very, very interesting, but let's now play a little bit with this guys right here. So once we hit this position right here, or actually instead of hitting this position right here, I'm actually going to delete this guy right there so that the position keeps going. So the swing is going to continue until the very bottom, until that point right there. And in this position, it's going to bounce back. So I'm going to break this tangent again, and I'm going to push this up like heavily so that it looks like it bounces back, and then it just like settles in or settles back into position. This one, I actually think I'm going to push it a little bit more. And again, we're going to move this tangent and use one of the principles of animation, which is called arcs, where we can play around and generate this sort of like bounce right here. So I think something like this should look good. Kind of want to like tweak this a little bit more to kind of like give it a little bit more floatiness. And now let's take a look. If we take a look at the animation and we hit play, okay, that looks good. I like the bump, but it's definitely happening way too late. So this thing is already kind of like settling in, and then the bounce happens. So I'm going to have to push this up and push this one down, make it a little bit more linear here as well. So it kind of like goes into the bounce, and like kind of at this point, I want this thing to bounce back. So as you can see here, it goes down and it bounces back and then it settles back down. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's a little bit better. I think it's a little bit fast. So I'm going to push this one more frame to the side. And this one right here, maybe a little bit more bounce right there. Okay, that looks good. I like that bounce. It's very cartoonish, very exaggerated, but it's definitely, again, happening way too late. So I'm going to push this back. I'm going to grab all of these guys and middle mouse and drag them so that we have them closer. And now we're going to be ending roughly at a 24 mark cycle. So it looks like this is actually like pushing back and just like bouncing it back. I'm even tempted to do this even more intensely. There we go. Look at that. So with that, we've able to create this very interesting animation. I still feel like maybe another bounce, like another small bounce could work. So a little bit after that, let's say 2 frames, I'm gonna push it back, or actually push it forward, and then 2 more frames, and we're gonna push it back, and this guy goes down like this. And this guys, I'm also gonna break the tangents so that we can make this very snappy effect and make it look like the lid is just like bouncing into place. There we go. Look at that. Cool, I like that. I really like how that is looking. The only thing that I would like now is for the initial little bump to be a little bit more interesting. So I feel like in frame 4, we have this opening here. So I feel like it could continue opening a little bit and then go back. So I'm going to add another keyframe right here. Remember, we're working on this rotation. So I'm going to push it a little bit more. I'm also going to make this guys a little bit more snappy. So let's snap this curve right here and snap this curve right here down. There we go. And what's going to happen is it's going to open, snap back, and then open all together. And this is what we should have. Okay, now I don't like it. It looks a little bit weird, to be honest. So it looks it's too fast. So we're not giving it enough time. And the only solution there is to give it more time, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. So I'm just going to eliminate that. And that's one of the fun parts about animation, is that you can play around with these interpolations and find out what works and what doesn't work. It's still giving me a little bit of a bump right there. It's giving me off a bump because we added this sort of like curve. What if let's try it. What if we change the curve to the other side? What if it opened, closed, and then opened all together? Maybe that's a little bit too much. But if we keep it very subtle, we might be able to get a little bit of something there. Yeah, that doesn't look that bad. It's barely perceptible, but there's a little bit of a slowdown there where kind of like there's a little bit of resistance before the whole chest opens up. And yeah, that looks good. I really like how that chest how the chest animation works. Now here's where, again, things can get really complicated. Another thing we could add, remember we had this like animation right here. We could do an animation where the chest like tumbles like to the side or something. The pivot point should be on the floor. So I'm just giving you options of what other things you could potentially open. Another thing we can do is we can animate the little handles right here. So the final thing that I want to show you is how to bring this animation into Unreal so that we can play it and generate something. So what we're going to do here is we're going to save this scene. Very important. We're going to save the scene as, and we're going to call this chest open so that we know that this is the animation of the chest opening. And we're just going to select the elements right here. We only need to select the the joints, the bones. You don't need to select the geometry because the geometry is already in Unreal. So I'm going to go export selection. we're going to go to our assets, got our chest right here in the new folder. Here's where we're going to have everything. We're going to export this as an FBX, very important, FBX export. And down here, we're going to bake animation. We're just going to do whatever, 0.99. It's only going to find until the frame 23, so that's fine. And we're going to call this chest underscore open. And I'm going to hit enter. As you can see, this gets exported and we're ready to go into Unreal. Let me show you how. Well, so now we're here inside of our Imaginarium, which is our Unreal project. And if you haven't seen this video where I show you how to texture this wolf heads, which by the way are nanite, you definitely need to check it out. It's going to be on the channel, so just look for it. So we're going to here to the chest and we're going to import to the game assets. And if we go to our projects right here, assets, chest, new folder, and we open the chest open animation, when we hit open, you can see that it automatically finds that we're assigning this to the chest skeleton, which is what we want. And we're going to be using the exported time and hit import. So if we double click on this thing, you're going to see that we have the animation here ready inside of Unreal as an asset. And everything's looking good. We got the textures, we've got the movement, like our chest is ready to go. So the only thing we need to do now is we need to create a little blueprint so that we have access to our chest. And this blueprint, by the way, we're going to be playing later on with a little bit of lights and particles and things like that. I will show you how to do all of that. But for now, we're just going to do a simple animation when the character gets close to it. So I'm going to create a new blueprint class. It's going to be an actor blueprint class. I'm going to call this BP underscore chest. And we're going to go inside of it. Inside of this blueprint class, we're going to go to components and we're going to add a skeletal mesh component right here. And this is skeletal mesh over on this side. We're going to select our chest. This will bring the chest inside of our element. And now we can use this actor and place it wherever we want in the world. Now, for this thing to actually animate, what we need to do is we need to go to the event graph and we need to generate an event. We need to generate something that's going to be like causing the whole thing to work, right? To open. And in this case, in order to do that, we need to add a collision box. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a collision box collision. And I'm going to modify this. This, of course, is going to be parented to the skeletal mesh, ideally. So wherever the chest moves, this collision box is going to be present. I'm going to create a relatively big collision box here in front of the chest so that we have a good access, especially here on the front part. And that's it. Now, this collision box, ideally, you want to rename it something that it's easy to remember, such as chest collision. There we go. So now we go to the event graph, we can right click on this guy, add an event and add a component begin overlap. So when the character, this is what we're about to do, we want to tell the programming part of things that when the character steps close to this area, we want the chest to open. And to do that, we need to do something called a cast. So we're going to do a cast to third-person character, which is the default character that we have. We want to confirm that the other actor that's doing the collision with this thing is this third-person character. So the casting, I learned, and I always teach this, it's kind of like doing a phone call. So you call someone picks up, and you're like, hey, are you, whatever, James? And it's like, yeah, this is James. Okay, James, I need you to do this. And if it's not James, then nothing happens. This node stops, right? So if the cast is successful, the execution pin right here is going to continue. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to do something called play animation of a skeletal mesh. Now, what skeletal mesh do we want to play? Of course, right now, the only skeletal mesh that we have is the chest right here. So by default, it's telling us that it's going to play an animation that's, again, like connected to this skeletal mesh. And over here, we're going to look, of course, for the chest open animation that we have right here. There we go. So we're going to have the chest open. We don't want this to loop, and we're just going to hit compile. By doing this, now I can grab this BP chest and position it anywhere along the world. And at any point in which I step over that collision box, we are going to see the chest opening. There we go. Look at that. Very cool, right? Look at that. That's beautiful. So by doing this, we get the chests to open and they're animating very nicely. This is what we would see on the game. Now, of course, right now we have the problem where every time we go through the collision box, it detects the event and it's like just playing the animation. Again, we will need to do, and actually let's do it. Like, why not? Let's do a very simple logic gate right here where I'm going to add a variable down here. It's going to be a very simple Boolean variable called open, a question. And what's going to happen is when the character steps on top of the chest, we are going to make a question. We're going to get the state of this thing, and we're going to do something called a branch. So if the chest is open, it's going to ask the question, is the chest open? And if the chest is open, which will be true, we're not going to do anything. If the chest is not open, First, what we're gonna do is we're gonna change the state of open to true, and then we're gonna open the chest with the animation, with display animation. This is a super simplified way of creating a logic gate. There's a ton of different ways, but this is pretty much asking or checking to know if the chest has been opened or not. Now, another thing we could do, I'll see if we do it or not. Let me know in the comments. I could add a timer to close the chest automatically after 5 seconds and reset this variable. There's a lot of things that you can do with programming. And this is one of the beauties about visual programming. I'm not a programmer. At least I don't consider myself to be a programmer. But this is fairly easy to understand and use whenever you want to create like simple things like this chest animation. So now that we've compiled, if we hit play and we open one of these chests, as you can see, if we open or go out and inside of the chest again, nothing's gonna happen. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, my friends. With this, we are pretty much ready to go into the next stage. It's going to be coming, not sure if this week, but in the next couple of weeks, where we're going to be taking a look at, someone was asking to do the Genshin Impact animation where the treasure just flies off the chest. I think that's a good idea. A couple of particles, something like that. And of course, maybe a close animation for the chest to despawn or disappear. We could do like a cartoony, like churn and then just disappear like a poof. I think that would be pretty interesting. But these are the principles of animation. This is how we animate a chest and an element inside of our DCC applications, in this case, Maya, and this is how we integrate it to Unreal. So hopefully you like this video. Again, I apologize for the last video where I promised that we were going to be doing this animation instead of sequencer. Again, I find it a little bit easier to explain the principles of animation right now through this video, but later on in another video, we'll do this inside of Unreal as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to join our Discord channel and participate in the Weapons of Legend or in our Sculptober event, which is happening right now. I will be seeing you back on the next one, and thank you very much, guys, for all of the support. Truly, it's thanks to you that I can be doing this every single day and sharing all of this knowledge with you. If you want to support the channel, feel free to just add a comment, share, like. It really helps us grow. And again, thank you very much for staying until the end of the video. I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.